the COVID vaccines cause heart damage. We're finding out the messenger RNA does not break down and get out of the human body. It's circulating in the bloodstream at least 3 years after the shots. Probably about 500 to 600,000 Americans have died of the vaccine. It's worse than a war.
Can you take people back to 2020? I still remember this video of you appealing to the Texas Assembly where you just said that no one is trying to ascribe any protocol to deal with this.
They never discussed treating a COVID patient. The only thing that was presented consistently and strongly was mass vaccination. On the same day, all over the world, at the same time, the press had a talking point. This was astonishing. From East Asia to United States, Canada, South Africa, the talking point was, no one is safe. A fear-based message. It was actually coordinated through the WHO.
The book is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. Why write this book now?
We could not understand what was going on through this COVID-19 vaccine debacle. Once we studied smallpox, measles, and diphtheria, and tetanus, and polio, we found these common ingredients of fear at the population level, hubris and arrogance, and there's always been a lot of money in vaccines, and then power. Most of these vaccine leaders were at the right hand of the king or queen or the president. Edward Jenner in the UK, Louis Pasteur in France, Anthony Fauci in the United States. I mean, you can see this now. There's a history here of a non-scientific religious belief in vaccines as a talisman. The only thing that was presented consistently was get vaccinated.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Peter McCullough, the internist, cardiologist, and epidemiologist who became one of the most visible medical voices challenging the official COVID-19 narrative. You've authored over 1,000 scientific publications, testified before the U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, the European Parliament, and multiple state legislatures on public health policy and patient rights. During the pandemic, you developed the McCullough protocol for early treatment, and more recently, a base spike detoxification protocol for those concerned about vaccine-related health effects. Your latest book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, addresses what you call the largest public health policy failure in modern history. Today, we'll discuss what people should do if they're worried about the COVID-19 vaccine, why no country has issued a safety review, and why governments continue buying boosters despite collapsing demand. Peter, welcome back to London Real.
This sounds like a science fiction movie, Brian. I just can't believe it.
Oh,
We've entered a time of great controversy, no doubt.
no doubt. And I distinctly remember our previous conversation 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember watching your testimony in front of, I think it was the Texas Congress or the legislature there, where you were spelling out and talking about your frustrations that you couldn't take action. And I think that if I had just had the McCullough protocol, and if so many people would have known that, would have saved us so much struggle and pain. And so I guess I'll just kick it off. There's a lot of people around the world, doctor, that are worried about the effect that the COVID-19 vaccine has on their health. And there's so many questions. There's so many people talking about it, but I don't think they know what to do. What should they do?
Well, you're broadcasting from Europe, and around the country, people took a whole array of different vaccines. So China and South America largely used the killed Sinovac coronavac vaccine, just the virus and killing it, injecting it. That looked like it was the most benign vaccine. And then there was a high-tech antigen vaccine called Novavax. Still have it available in the United States. That was probably next in line in terms of safety. Then we got into the genetic vaccines. These were big gambles. AstraZeneca and Janssen, nearly identical, by the way, adenoviral vaccines. And they were made by the same company, by the way, Emergent Biosolutions in the United States. And then lastly, the messenger RNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna. In the United States, 81% of Americans took one or more shots, according to USA Facts, which uses the CDC tabular data. But only 70% of Americans took two shots. Only 70% became fully vaccinated. Now, as you pointed out, the CDC won't even tell us how many people are taking boosters. We're on booster number 9. And my estimate is it's close to zero. The CDC won't tell us. You're right that the countries keep buying vaccines and then just point them down the drain.
Wow. I want to get into why they're doing that, and maybe even why they have not issued any safety reviews. Look, we broadcast all throughout that time, and I was lucky to spend time with you and Jay Bhattacharya and Dr. Martin Kulldorff and Bobby Kennedy. And so I was in a beautiful seat and I could make a decision, but I know so many of my loved ones that just weren't privy to the information, and a lot of them regret taking it and they don't know what to do. And I'm wondering, like, how would people find out if they have side effects, or what they even could do to maybe protect against having taken that vaccine?
People should know now that, let's focus on Pfizer, Moderna here in the United States. 94% of those who took a shot took one of the messenger RNA vaccines. We're finding out the messenger RNA does not break down and get out of the human body. So this is alarming. Kariko and Weizmann won the Nobel Prize for the process of pseudouridination, making the messenger RNA fully synthetic. And this synthetic genetic code is unassailable from human enzymes that normally would break it down. In research, we have some of my patients now, in a collaboration with Germany, we can find messenger RNA in the bloodstream, inside white blood cells, even in organs like the skin on skin biopsy, 3.2 years after the shots. The messenger RNA is still cranking out the spike protein. The spike protein is the spine on the surface of the virus. So it's this little spike here. The genetic code for the spike protein is produced in the body for an uncontrolled duration, an uncontrolled quantity. And what we do is we measure it. We measure the antibodies to the spike protein as a proxy for how much is in the body on a quantitative scale using the Roche Alexis platform. And then we can actually use research labs and directly measure spike protein. Concurrent with the messenger RNA data, it's circulating in the bloodstream, at least 3 years after the shots. The spike protein damages the heart, causes blood clots, strokes, nervous system problems, and immunologic problems. So one of the keys is to get rid of spike protein. And that's the reason why we dedicated all of our scholarship and give great credit to the Japanese for the discovery of nattokinase. Nattokinase is a natural enzyme derived from the fermentation of soy or chickpeas. Bromelain, derived from a family of enzymes derived from pineapple, also breaks down the spike protein. They can be taken as supplements. And then curcumin, derived from turmeric, blocks the inflammatory effects of the spike protein. So we've combined them all in one. I'm the chief scientific officer of the wellness company that has the premier combination product called the Ultimate Spike Detox. And this is the most popular way worldwide that people are now starting to address this mistake of taking the vaccines. The ultimate spike detox, in my experience, needs to be taken for about a year. We remeasure the spike tests in the bloodstream. We see declines, patients improve in terms of their symptoms, and we think we can get them out of this jam.
Now, in order for that to help them, they have to be aware that they actually could be vaccine injured. And I'm curious, doctor, how many people even know that that's a possibility? And then maybe of those people, how many people maybe take action towards that?
My recent Senate testimony, May 21st, 2025, we identified that the government was covering up. I mean, the U.S. government agencies were covering up heart damage due to the vaccines called myocarditis. This is now fully in a U.S. Senate Permanent Investigations Committee report. The vaccine manufacturers now put in the package insert an admission that the COVID vaccines cause heart damage. Wow. Well, I can tell you as a cardiologist, no degree of heart damage is acceptable. And so a recent Rasmussen survey, to address your question, after our Senate hearings, I was the lead witness, asked the United States public in a valid survey, and the answer was 51% of Americans now know the vaccines cause heart damage. So it's just slightly more than that of those who don't. But the next cardiac arrest that occurs in a perfectly healthy person, or fatal seizure, or you name it, in somebody previously healthy, the first question we should ask is, did they take a COVID-19 vaccine? I'm still seeing new heart damage, blood clots, cardiac arrests, even years after the shots.
I do see on X and Twitter all the time anecdotal evidence. This young sports star has the heart attack. This person does this, person does that. Is that just humans identifying pieces, or we've actually seen much younger people suffering heart damage that could be related to the vaccine?
We certainly see the anecdotes, and I can tell you for every public figure that we see develop a clear-cut vaccine problem, there has to be, tens or hundreds of thousands, even millions of, people that are not public figures. So, when Eric Clapton came out and said he can't play the guitar because he has a vaccine amplified neuropathy, I had a chance to examine Eric. I can tell you there are millions like him who develop these problems. Megyn Kelly, who came out and said she has an autoimmune problem. Kirk Herbstreit, my favorite ESPN announcer, vaccine blood clots. Yet other public figures can't see it. Former Dallas Cowboy great Deion Sanders takes the shots, public about it, develops vaccine blood clots in the legs, arterial and venous, needs amputations. I mean, this is a big deal. He had some altered anatomy and a family history of vascular disease to begin with, had no business taking shots. He did it. He does a whole docuseries on his recovery after the amputations, doesn't mention the vaccines. Now Deion Sanders is in the news with what's called a turbo cancer. And a man in his 50s has had his whole bladder removed because of, an aggressive cancer. His now urine's collected into a bag. I've never seen that in my career in medicine, a man in his 50s with that aggressive bladder cancer. And when we go to the medical literature, we find descriptions of exactly these cases.
So in many ways, the psychological operations are still in full force. And there are people that will probably never refuse to even consider alternate pieces, but other people are opening their minds up a little bit more, like you said, that they're starting to question and to even understand that there are some bad areas. Where are we with that psychological war? Also, it seems like many people have forgot about what happened a few years ago. I'm curious how those mix together.
In our book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, we point out that vaccines have been presented to the public now for centuries as articles of faith, as if we need to have a religious belief in vaccines. Many times doctors will ask, do you believe in vaccines? I mean, nobody asks me if I believe in, blood pressure lowering medicine or cholesterol lowering medicine. Why do we have to believe in vaccines? Well, it comes from this archetypal fear of being invaded by foreign invaders, and that through the hubris of mankind, the brilliance of vaccinology, that doctors can improve upon God's creation, can make the body more resilient. And I know you as somebody, you are a man of resilience with all your efforts in as being a triathlete, myself as a marathoner. We know human resilience is something that's inherent in us. And then this idea that there's always been a feeling that the vaccines aren't perfect. So in order for this to work, everybody must take a vaccine. And so if some are injured or die as a result of taking the vaccine, they should take it for the betterment of humanity. And that's called vaccine ideology. I think it's operative. The last time I testified in the Senate, there was no pushback on vaccine injuries, disabilities, and deaths. So from those on the other side, which was Richard Blumenthal and then Hawaii Governor Josh Green, they just kept saying it was worth it. It was worth it, that the vaccines saved lives, so therefore it's justified for the vaccines to take lives. And I think that's the ethical dilemma now that the public has come to realize.
I was in a really tricky situation, doctor, because I was a man of science. I graduated from MIT with an engineering degree. And so I fell in love with the science. And in many ways, I was blinded by the science. And I still remember my live episode with Bobby Kennedy in May 2020, where I told him, vaccines are something I learned out at school and they clearly work. And he said, you know what, Brian? He said, when you get humans involved, this is when they don't work. And he broke it all down for me. But if I hadn't had that conversation, I think all of my science training would have made it very hard for me to see through that. And I'm wondering if you see this happen a lot with doctors that and other people in science, where is it blinded by it or seduced by it? I don't know what it is.
Scientists actually, I think, seek security through consensus and through guidelines and through their societies. And like you, vaccines weren't a big part of my practice, but I never questioned them. I had taken all the vaccines. I had taken extra vaccines when I visited a rainforest one time. So I took a flu shot every year because that was necessary to be on medical staff. And, I took it. I just never questioned them. And then in the book, I just vaguely pulled together some recollections where my brother, who's here in Dallas, he had a colleague who just took a routine flu shot and developed Guillain-Barré syndrome, where he was paralyzed and bedridden the rest of his life. And it just raises the issue. The chances of you and I getting influenza per year are way less than 1%. If we get flu, we have multiple FDA-approved drugs, secondary antibiotics. It's a very treatable condition. Would you and I ever take any risk of being permanently paralyzed from a flu shot? Would we ever do that? And, that was really amplified with the COVID-19 vaccines. And myself and my co-author, John Leake, what we thought was, listen, if the vaccine community now can turn a complete blind eye to a massive number of deaths. In the United States, 19,000 deaths reported to the CDC by doctors who, have determined the vaccines are the cause of death. 1,000 Americans died in the vaccine center, or a few hours later. Another 1,000 died the next day. If our government can turn a blind eye to that, then what did happen over the course of history? And that's when we started to, do our research and scholarship. And we were astounded to learn that even in the late 19th century, people were put in jail in Boston, Toronto, and the UK if they refused a smallpox vaccine. Can you imagine? You're actually incarcerated if you don't go along with the vaccine narrative.
Wow. I did not even know that was true. And why has no country issued a safety review? I know you spoke to Congress, and do you believe that the U.S. will at some point do that? Obviously, I can see what Bobby's doing in there, but he's got a lot of things to do. How come no country has come out, and do you think they will?
It was the topic of my Chautauqua lecture. I recently lectured in Chautauqua in Western New York. That's where the Roosevelts have lectured and many dignitaries. You may recall Salman Rushdie was actually stabbed on stage in Chautauqua in 2022. Yeah. But at Chautauqua, Brian, what I did is I laid out these medical controversies where the medical orthodoxy is on the wrong side of things.
Investment Club. Today, I consider it the best investment that I've ever made. We get 4 projects presented a week by their associated CEOs. Personally, I'm completely blown away by the quality of these projects, and I know of nowhere else where I would be given this same opportunity. Each week that passes, I feel more appreciative of the fact that I'm a member of this group. The vibe was just tremendous. Everybody's on the same wavelength. We just clicked. Everybody listened to each other, enjoyed their company. It was just magical, magical. Take action. Don't take my word for it. Due diligence you need to do. And I really hope that someday down the road I see you in the club. It far exceeded expectations, without question.
I mean orthodoxy, I mean the practicing medical community, the government agencies, you know, pretty much the entire complex. And I pointed out that we had a cocaine epidemic. The first great cocaine epidemic was 1860 to 1920. Every medicinal made by Merck and Sanofi and all the drug companies was derivatives of cocaine. Cocaine was in Chianti wine, Coca-Cola. And all the journal articles were all about the salutary effects of cocaine. William Halsted, the father of modern surgery, became a cocaine addict because he was using it as an anesthetic and also self-experimenting. Sigmund Freud became a cocaine addict. So this was so bad that the doctors weren't doing anything about this. Coca-Cola had to voluntarily pull it out of their products. So did the makers of Chianti wine, Pemberton wines. And it went all the way to Woodrow Wilson, who started to take action in 1913. Finally, in the UK, they just banned it. But the doctors, the point is, for 60 years, the doctors didn't step forward. There was one paper published in JAMA, our major medical journal in the United States, that expressed any concern about the rampant addictive properties of cocaine used in modern medicine. So that was the first example of 60 years the medical community could not rein it in on safety. The next example is smoking. Now, smoking, I put that 1920 all the way to at least 1964. And we had Sir Austin Bradford Hill, as well as William Dowley in the UK, present compelling data that smoking causes lung cancer. They presented it. They did a follow-up study. It was convincing. The entire medical community rejected them because the doctors were smoking, the nurses were smoking, and Philip Reynolds and RGR had doctor smoking promotional campaigns. Yeah. Everyone smoked at the CDC and the NIH and the FDA and the MHRA, the Medical Research Council. So they were rejected. In fact, the tobacco companies went after these guys with a vengeance. They were smeared and canceled and professionally destroyed. This went all the way to 1964. And Luther Terry, the Surgeon General, calls all the chiefs of medicine to Washington and says, I got bad news for you. Smoking causes lung cancer. They still can't accept this. And then finally, in 1972, the AMA has its first educational campaign about the hazards of smoking. So let me tell you, on cocaine and smoking, doctors were on the wrong side of those arguments, and it took decades. Now they're deeply on the wrong side of these COVID-19 vaccines. And I don't know how long it's going to take. We're 5 years into the vaccine debacle.
I remember seeing these old Lucky Strike ads where 3 out of 5 doctors recommend Lucky Strike unfiltered cigarettes. And they're just shocking to read, and I guess it shows you the level of brainwashing then, and it's alive today.
Right.
Most people think of the lockdown and the pandemic and COVID as this distant memory, but I think most people will believe that something like it will happen again, if not in our lifetime, maybe in the next decade. And I'm just wondering if we still haven't admitted these effects, how much in danger are we of repeating the same thing, or are we much more aware, or is that really just being oblivious?
We've had predictions from Tedros Ghebreyesus at the WHO, Anthony Fauci, Ashish Jha, former White House coordinator, Bill Gates. They all say there's going to be another pandemic. They call it Disease X. All the experts agree it's going to come out of a biolab. It's not coming out of nature. It's going to be just like SARS-CoV-2, which came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. All the U.S. intelligence agencies agree it's a man-made virus. There's going to be another one. That these biolabs are proliferating. They're all over the world. There are leaks. There's well-documented hundreds of leaks. Sooner or later, a bad pathogen's going to get out, and then we're going to be off to another pandemic. These shouldn't come up, once every 100 to 200 years, not every several years. On top of that, we can see how this biopharmaceutical complex now is gaming the system. So if there's enough fear and messaging on an outbreak, then governments will be, in a sense, seduced to buy large quantities of vaccines, and then this biopharmaceutical complex, they financially benefit. There's really trillions involved when we're talking about the WHO, the World Economic Forum, United Nations, Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Wellcome Trust, all the regulatory agencies and the companies making the products. There's trillions of dollars involved. So let me give you an example. Monkeypox outbreak. Well, we got to the point where Biden declared a national and public health emergency for monkeypox. That was enough to trigger purchase of the Jynneos monkeypox vaccine. Nobody took it, but the company was rewarded with a massive contract. So, mission accomplished. There was enough of a monkeypox scare to make this happen. Next one has been bird flu or avian influenza. The same thing. There's been enough fear to trigger purchase of vaccines. The EU purchased a massive number of human bird flu vaccines. And now we're seeing the emergence of the chikungunya virus borne by mosquitoes in China. And guess what? There was a new vaccine that just came to market a few months ago. So you can start to see the business model of pandemics and then mass vaccination, and the purchaser is government, so you don't even have to market it to the public.
And now they've had a great case study in psychological operations. It worked pretty well, and they've learned things. They're really very good at messaging and repetition and all the other aspects of those they call fifth generation psyops. So I guess they've learned and they're ready to deploy again.
It looks like it. You can see some of these tactics. One of them is called flooding the zone. We highlight this in my first book, Courage to Face COVID-19. So let me give you an example, Brian. So in 2020, on the same day, all over the world, at the same time, the press had a talking point. This was astonishing, from East Asia to United States, Canada, South Africa. And in 2020, the talking point was, no one is safe. A fear-based message, and then some B-roll of some, grisly people wearing masks or in body bags. No one is safe. And so people have said, listen, how is that coordinated? Across all that, and investigative attorney Lisa Myron from Toronto believes it was actually coordinated through the WHO. WHO has over 190 member nations, and they have over what's called 140 national focal points. That is communication nodes. One in the United States is in Washington called PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. So that's how these messages come out simultaneously like that. So it kind of synchronizes the world.
And it's just incredible how fear can be used. I remember, Doctor, extremely intelligent friends I had, MIT grads, successful entrepreneurs, billionaires, who, when that happened, because of that campaign of fear, these guys were the ones that were out there when their groceries were delivered, wiping down every single bottle and every single package. And I remember looking at him saying, this can't be the same person that could conquer anything in the real world, that could solve any problem, that had the resilience to do anything. And yet, when the fear was dialed in a certain way and coordinated and maybe towards your health, I saw what I thought were extremely intelligent, credible people break down to where I couldn't even understand their decisions anymore.
They literally lost their minds. In my first book, we have an opening scene where this man is so frustrated with the pandemic, he gets on a paddleboard in San Francisco Bay with his dog, and he paddles way far away from shore just to get some relief. And then sure enough, a Coast Guard boat comes out to intercept him and arrest him for not wearing a mask. And you can see that this idea, masking was a good example of how people lost their minds. People wearing masks in cars, driving alone, even wearing masks in Olympic swimming pools. It came to symbolize some type of mania. Another is just taking vaccines. Think about this. We're told right now, in our U.S. FDA, the new staffers, Prasad and Macquarie, they published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine saying 1/3 of Americans should still be taking COVID vaccines. So how can taking 8 shots of synthetic messenger RNA, how can that be healthy in any way? It's inexplicable.
Yeah. You mentioned Tedros from the WHO, and I'm curious. I know that they had tried to get everyone to sign this. I think it was the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty, and I believe that Marco Rubio has opted out of that in the last month or so. And some people were calling that a pretty surprising step forward, where they were going to try to kind of seize control of sovereign nations in the event that they would determine there's a new pandemic. First of all, am I getting that right? And do you see that as a positive sign?
Well, we had the Pandemic Treaty Alliance International Health Regulations. The United States didn't sign off at the last minute. It was Trump, and you're right, because the Department of State and USAID, our representatives, they pulled out. Kennedy, wanted us to pull out, and that was the right move. But, the UK signed on to it. So did all the other countries. What it does now is it gives, binding by international law, the WHO the ability to declare a pandemic, to declare contagion control measures like locking down, masking, and then the WHO can conduct and direct a global mass vaccination program. And this isn't just for human disease. They want dominion over all plants, animals, and humans. So the WHO is part of this incredible power grab that we're seeing worldwide, and this tension between globalization and then resistance to it.
Doctor, you mentioned kind of, the history of the medical establishment not being able to recognize the cocaine issue, the tobacco issue, but is there any historical precedent for this entire vaccine debacle?
Nothing close to it. I just can't imagine convincing the entire world to do something. Like you, I travel the world. There's great differences from country to country. You can't get countries to agree on anything. How the entire world fell into mass vaccination, the estimation is probably about 2/3 of the world's population took a vaccine. Now, the countries that essentially were unvaccinated, and they were simply too poor the governments to procure vaccines, like Ivory Coast or Haiti, they're the ones who came out the best. There's been multiple analyses showing the least vaccinated countries did the best. The most heavily vaccinated countries did the worst. And the countries that are fair about the data, like the Czech Republic, show it's among the vaccinated who are having difficulties with fertility and fetal loss and all-cause mortality skyrocketing. Because the vaccines contribute to cardiovascular mortality, to cancer outcomes, as well as the other fractions, all-cause mortality in 12 studies now is rising as a result of mass vaccination.
Wow. Can you take people back to 2020 and you and the stand that you made? And again, I still remember this video of you appealing, to the, I guess it was the Texas Assembly, where you just said that, I could not understand as a medical professional that no one is trying to ascribe any protocol to deal with this. And you were just almost flabbergasted. And it felt like everybody in that room was nodding their head with you, saying, this guy seems to be making a ton of sense. It was almost like you were calling out the thing that nobody could see, maybe because of all the fear. I was wondering if you could walk us through that and what it was like to be that guy in 2020, because it wasn't easy.
Well, in 2020, I was a full professor of medicine. I was the most published person in my field in history, and I saw this COVID-19 pandemic evolving. And within a few months, I realized that, there was no solution being proposed by Harvard or by Yale or UCLA or Emory or any of our marquee institutions. And across the world, nothing out of London, Karolinska, you can just go down the list. No academic medical center had an approach. They had no protocol. This was stunning. And people were getting sick at home. There were two bad outcomes, hospitalization and death. And the medical establishment was doing nothing to stop these hospitalizations and deaths. So I put all my efforts into this. Initially, I got large research grants, dedicated my research team to this, developed a national team. We published the first protocol to treat COVID-19, and we published it in August of 2020. That's pretty rapid since it takes months to do all this work. And it became the protocol for the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. I presented it in the U.S. Senate November of 2020. I mean, I did this everything as I possibly could. And fortunately, people were treated, and those who were treated did avoid hospitalization and death. Sadly, those who didn't, they ended up in the hospital or worse. But then as the vaccines rolled out early in 2021, I was called to the the Texas Senate, Health and Human Services. That's the video probably you're thinking of. And every presentation, I sat there for hours. Every presentation was about masking and lockdowns and personal protective equipment and vaccines. Not a single one was about treating sick patients. So I appealed to Senator Kulldorff, and I said, where is the interest in treating people sick right now? Why is everybody focused on a vaccine? A vaccine is not treatment. And people who take vaccines, they were still getting COVID. So we have to treat them anyway. And people had this blind spot to treatment. Well, that video, as you point out, that was picked up by Tucker Carlson. Tucker had me on the next couple months, and I sat down and explained this to him. He goes, I can't believe that Harvard, after a year and a half, doesn't know what to do when a sick COVID patient calls. It's all the brain power in Boston. You train there. I mean, I was the endowed visiting professor at Harvard in 2019. I lectured in 2 divisions, cardiology and nephrology. Listen, Boston's got a lot of brain power. Why were they suddenly out of intellectual ammo? They froze, and they could do nothing to help COVID patients. It's astonishing.
Did they freeze? Were they told not to? Or is it just when you're motivated by money, it's easy? What do they say? If a man makes his living from something, it's very hard for him to see any other argument around it. I'm butchering that, but why do you think that was? Or is that a whole nother episode?
Well, listen, I was at Baylor at the time, and I didn't get any emails saying that, hey, don't do anything until we get a vaccine. I think it was paralysis. In fact, I was in a Harvard consortium called Stop COVID. I'll never forget it. David Leaf was the principal investigator. I said, terrific, we're going to stop COVID. What are our projects? And then the group really essentially was just going to observe COVID. They weren't going to stop it at all. UT Southwestern here in Dallas, well known for its Nobel laureates. I attended school here in Southwestern in Dallas. They were on TV because they were modeling. They were modeling how the virus was spreading. Another one of my alumni organizations, University of Washington in Seattle, again, Nobel laureates there. They were modeling. So everybody wanted to look at this. Nobody wanted to do anything. Even my counterpart, Scott Atlas from the Hoover Institute at Stanford, Scott and I were chosen by The Hill, which is the most widely read journal for the House, the Senate, and the White House, to write op-eds every month about the pandemic.
What the London Real Investment Club actually does for you, it gives you the keys to open that door to the inside deals. In the last 3 weeks, I've participated in 3 incredible deals: a layer 2 Bitcoin protocol, an incredible AI protocol. The deal flow is beyond what I expected. I don't think I've ever seen a model like this that just gives average folks the opportunity to be behind the deals. And that's exactly what we've done. Not only that, you get to hang out with Brian Rose every week. And for me, that was huge because I look at Brian as somebody who's not only an expert in the space, and I think is on the leading edge, but just the leading edge of thought with London Real and the work he's doing there. To anyone who's taking a serious look at this, I know it's a big decision. It was a big decision for me and my family, and it is one of the best decisions I've ever made. So I wish you all the best and hope you come join us.
Scott was writing about how, masking and lockdowns, what have you. I was writing about how are we going to treat this to get people through the illness. And so you can tell that and Scott wrote a book. He was ultimately invited in the White House for 9 months with Trump. According to Scott's book, after 9 months of meetings with him and others, and Jay Bhattacharya, who's now at the NIH, they never discussed treating a COVID patient. It was all about masks and lockdowns and just not treating the problem. This is astonishing. Trump got an early version of the McCullough protocol in April of 2020. He got through the infection. It should be celebrated. But yet there's still to this day a blind eye in treatment. No, there was no channel in London that was presenting any updates of what people should do about COVID-19. And yet great literature was developing regarding using nasal sprays and gargles to prevent transmission. They were far more effective than vaccines. The early treatment protocols refined. Even government-issued drugs were not promoted, like Paxlovid and Molnupiravir and Bamlanivimab and all the monoclonal antibodies. They were kind of undermined. The only thing that was presented consistently and strongly was mass vaccination.
And can you remind us a little bit about the McCullough protocol? Because as I remember you describing it to me, it seemed like some really practical, things like you just said, with the gargling and the nasal cleansing and some other basic pieces that I wish I would have known that, but I wasn't privy to that information. What was it?
Well, McCullough protocol started by saying, listen, we're all going to get COVID. Turns out that was right. All this, wearing masks and everything was predicated on the fact that you could avoid getting COVID. Turns out everybody got it. 97% of people serologically got COVID. So it started out with the right premise. We're going to get it. Okay, so just get ready for it. And then the next step was risk stratification, meaning it's seemingly a very mild illness. And largely people under 50, we didn't need to do anything. In fact, largely we didn't treat anybody under 50. But if they were, under 50 or over 50, we start to have problems: obesity, heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, cancer, elderly. That's where the risks were high enough for hospitalization and death. We should do something. Well, what can we do? Open the windows, air out the house. All the transmission just about occurred in the home. Rebreathing the virus was re-amplifying the inoculum. So we need fresh air. I used to get my patients outside, front porch, back porch, all the time. Just don't stay in the house and keep rebreathing the virus. Nasal sprays and gargles. Turned out everything worked. Saline, dilute iodine, xylitol-based. Multiple clinical trials. Super important. Twice a day for prevention. And then you can accelerate every 4 hours in acute treatment. There were even randomized trials of nasal sprays and gargles in the hospital, and they improved outcomes. Yet hospitals didn't adopt nasal sprays and gargles. After that, it was nutraceuticals and supplements. We had very good data. Every study done showed vitamin D was preventive and therapeutic at higher doses. Vitamin C, zinc. We used quercetin, had positive data. In Asia, they used other forms of medicinal and culinary herbs. And then an over-the-counter drug in the United States, famotidine. Huge University of Virginia study showed that as an antihistamine, that had benefit. After that, we moved into the antivirals, and there was always a choice. And this is where all the focus was, but there was always a choice: hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and when they came online, Paxlovid and Molnupiravir. And the antivirals were neither necessary nor sufficient, yet everybody wanted to focus on the antivirals. After that, antibiotics, very important, azithromycin or doxycycline, aspirin, corticosteroids for inflammation, colchicine for inflammation, and then...
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.